But let us not be overthrown at the final test, who of old renounced the shadow and the ring. In sorrow we must go, but not in despair. Behold, we are not bound forever to the circles of the world, and beyond them is more than memory. Farewell. Greetings, friends. I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Yoiston here, and today we will be taking a look at what happens after death in the afterlife of each major kindred in Tolkien's works, as this isn't a topic that is heavily discussed within the legendarium. Now, this topic is pretty ambiguous within the text, and I will share what I have found. Please let me know about any contradictory information or corrections in the comments below. Thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. First, I want to say that it seems spirits of all sentient creatures are immortal within Tolkien's works. We will first start with the Ainur, the angelic spirits manifested by Eru Ilúvatar before the first music of the Ainur that created the world. Among the Ainur are the spirits of the Valar and Maiar, so we are talking about characters such as Manwë, Melkor, Gandalf, and Sauron in this section. Now, we never see a Vala die except for in the Dagor-Dagorath, or even their physical form completely destroyed. However, the Valar may carry scars. Fingolfin would permanently wound Morgoth's foot during his duel with the Dark Lord, meaning that Melkor's mortal form does not have complete regeneration. So it is my belief that the Valar cannot die, at least their spirits cannot, unless the Dagor-Dagorath is to happen and Melkor is killed by Turin, but again, the Dagor-Dagorath is debated as being canon or not within Tolkien's works. It may be possible for the mortal forms of the Valar to perish or linger in injury, but ultimately it seems that they are tied to Arda, except for Melkor when he was expelled beyond the Walls of Night, encircling Arda after the War of Wrath. As for the Maiar, we see with the destruction of Durin's Bane, Gandalf the Grey, and some of Sauron's forms, it is possible for a Maiar's physical form to perish, so that their Fëar, or spirits, may wander the world or be sent beyond the Walls of Night, or in Gandalf's case, to go back to Eru Ilúvatar's timeless halls to be re-embodied. So in conclusion for the Ainur, their spirits cannot die, even if their physical forms can. The Valar seem to be tied to the world unless they are cast out, and the Maiar seem to be able to go beyond the confines of Arda, or wander within it, as Sauron did. Now let's look at the Elves, the firstborn children of Ilúvatar. In terms of time, they were immortal, for Tolkien intended them to be timeless and to explore the sorrows of life that is never promised to end. However, the elves could be killed in combat, die of grief or weariness, and the elves that stayed in Middle-earth in the Fourth Age and beyond would fade. For their Fëar, or spirits, would consume their Hroar, or bodies. The spirits of the elves whose bodies would die or fade would be thusly summoned to Mandos, the doomsman of the Valar. But it was the choice of the spirits to go or not, for, according to the notes within Morgoth's ring, the spirits could refuse the summons and haunt the place of their deaths or wander. Elves who did not go to Mandos would never be re-embodied, and they would linger forever. Such is the fate of those elves that did not sail west at the end of or after the Third Age. As for the elves who did accept the summons of Mandos, they would go to the Halls of Awaiting and could possibly be re-embodied and return to life in Aman. None could escape the halls of Mandos without the consent of Lord Mandos himself. However, most elves would sail west at the end of the Third Age, and they would live out the rest of the ages of the world in the Undying Lands. While Valinor does not prevent everything, or even mortals from dying there, it is unlikely that any elf died in Aman after sailing west. But even in all of these scenarios of fading and death, the elves were tied to Arda, and they would never truly leave it until after the Dagor-Dagorath, if the last battle was to indeed happen, for they would help sing a new world into being during the second music of the Ainur. Now let's move on to Ilúvatar's second-born children, men. The race of men is quite large, and I believe that their relatives, such as the Hobbits and Druedain, among other folk, all share the same afterlife in Tolkien's works. Men have a rather ambiguous afterlife, and the gift of men, as it is called, allows for their fates to be severed from that of the elves. While the firstborn are always tied to the world and its fate, men and their mortal relatives could leave the circles of the world behind after going to a different part of the Halls of Mandos and passing beyond them. It is not known exactly where they would go, but I like to believe that men would journey beyond Arda and the Walls of Night to the timeless halls of Ilúvatar to live with Eru, or God. But it is possible that evil men would live with Melkor beyond the Walls of Night. Now, the gift of men was seen by many of the mortal kind as a curse after the race of men had lived long within Arda, for they were afraid of death. This would cause some to try to become immortal, or to be cursed with immortality, which was indeed possible in certain circumstances. The Nazgul and Oathbreakers were once men, but they were bound by rings of power and broken oaths respectively, and they were chained to some form of spiritual existence within Middle-earth. Even Smeagol was able to elongate his life by carrying the One Ring for so long. But these expansions of life were neither good nor wise approaches, for mortal death was a gift, so that men could know a long slumber away from Arda. Some men were even granted longer lives by Iluvatar, such as the Númenóreans, for being faithful and rather good beings, but that gift would diminish as time went on, and men would begin to worship Melkor in Númenor in the hopes for immortality. But royalty and faithfulness seem to correlate with a longer life, for Aragorn lived to be 210 years old, and it is due to the gift of men and the apparent favoritism of men by Iluvatar that some elves seem to be jealous of men. However, there are also some righteous exceptions to the gift of men. After Luthien moved Mandos to Pity, Beren was resurrected. There's even the rare exception of Tuor, the son of Huor, whose story takes place during the fall of Gondolin. He would be sundered from his kin's fate and become counted among the Eldar. Finally, like the elves, if the Dagor Dagorath was to indeed take place, and Arda was remade, the spirits of men would help sing the new world into being during the second music of the Ainur. As for the Half Elves, after Eärendil came to Valinor to seek aid for the Free Peoples at the end of the First Age, the Valar granted Half Elves the choice between being elven and immortal, or men and mortal. Elrond, the son of Eärendil and Elwing, chose to be an elf, while his brother Elros chose to be a man, and he became the first king of Númenor. While Elrond's children would be given the choice as well, Elros's children would not have such a decision, and eventually, the Númenorian kings who feared death would regret their forefathers' choice. Eärendil, Elwing, and Elrond would all be given this choice, but Elros would ultimately be the only one to become a man, and his line would eventually produce Aragorn, while Elrond's daughter would be Arwen. Aragorn and Arwen's son Eldarion would not be counted as half-elven, but rather as one of the Dunedain. The half-elves are strange and rare exceptions to the rules of death and afterlife in Middle-earth, for they had the choice to be bound to Arda or to leave it behind in the end. Next, let's move on to the Dwarves. While it is not believed that they would take any part in Dagor Dagorath, Arda Unmarred, and the second music of the Ainur, the Dwarves who died over the ages of the world might be gathered to their own place in the Halls of Mandos, to await the rebuilding of the world with Aule the Smith, or Mahal as they called him. Aule the Smith was the Vala of crafts, rocks, and metal, and it is through his design that the Dwarves came to be, and so it is with him that the Dwarves are prophesied to help rebuild a new Middle-earth after the old one comes to its end. Now let's take a look at the still sentient but more abstract free peoples, such as the Eagles, Ents, Giants, Rivermaids, Tom Bombadil, Huon the Hound, and others like them. If indeed these creatures can die, not necessarily from time but from combat or something else, it is likely that the spirits of these creatures would return to their masters in the west or to Iluvatar himself. It is possible that the spirits of the Eagles, for instance, returned to Manwë, or that the spirits of the Ents returned to Yavanna, or it could be that they returned to Iluvatar's halls, for if these creatures had spirits of their own, it was Iluvatar that granted them. But this is speculation on my part, for these creatures and those that are like them have abstract and enigmatic details, so it is impossible to know for certain what happens to them when they die. Finally, let's look at the servants of evil, both the simple ones and the abstract ones who may not have Fear. It is said that Melkor could not create, only corrupt and mock. So orcs, Uruk-hai, and trolls, who are mockeries of elves, men, and Ents respectively, potentially shared the same afterlife of the beings that they mocked in some way or another. I would speculate that in the end, their deaths may have purified their being if they had Fear, or their spirits became like the things that they mocked. Or it is indeed possible that they just joined the Dark Lord beyond the walls of night when they were killed. As for the dragons, vampires, werewolves, wargs, spiders, wights, ringwraiths, Ungoliant, and others, again, if they had spirits, they may have been purified, or perhaps they were also cast beyond the walls of night alongside Melkor. I subscribe to the idea that the dragons could have also been Maiar, or that they did not possess spirits of their own and were simply the drones of the Dark Lord's will. If any of these creatures were Maiar, they would have shared the fates of the Balrogs like we've previously discussed in the Maiar section, but if they were simply machines of the Dark Lord, there would have been nothing in the afterlife for them, for they would not have possessed spirits. But if I had to speculate, the most likely answer for the afterlife of all servants of darkness, I would imagine that they joined the Dark Lord beyond the walls of night for eternity. For in life their deeds were fell and terrible, even if they were but corrupted victims, such as the early orcs. Again, like the previous group of miscellaneous free peoples, it is impossible to be sure what happens to this miscellaneous group of villains when they die. And so with all of the major races covered, our tales and speculations about afterlives in Tolkien's works come to an end. Tolkien wrote death to be mostly ambiguous, with hints of possibilities in his legendarium, which reflects our own real-life knowledge of death as well. I can talk more about how Tolkien approaches death thematically in his works in a Building a World video if you all would like. Just let me know in the comments below. From the afterlives in Tolkien's works, we see that no matter what comes next, it is important to live in the now while we have time and strength left to do good in the world. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this video with a friend. A big shout out to Carmine of RedTeamReview for suggesting this video. Thank you very much, man. Let me know your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections about what happens after death in Tolkien's works in the comments below. Please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, Loot Crate partnership, Discord server, and Patreon in the description below. A new podcast will be coming out on Patreon soon, so please consider looking into it for just $1 a month. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again in next week's video about Isengard and its history. As always, everyone, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.